I've spent a lot of time on my Roland TD50 recently, and while I really like it, there's definitely things that I think could be improved upon. Today I'm going to go into what I think would be the best features to add to the next Roland flagship module, and they might not necessarily be what you'd think. Let's get to it. Hey, welcome back to the eDrum Workshop. I'm Luke and I hope you're having a great day. We talk all things electronic and hybrid drums here, so subscribe and hit the notification bell to stay up to date with any discussions, news, reviews and tutorials. And if you own any of these modules, head over to my website after watching, there's a link in the description, and check out the EDW Snare Elements pack for snare tones like the ones in the intro video. Roland, love them or hate them, are still the biggest player in the electronic drum market, despite the fact that many modules from other manufacturers have now surpassed a lot of what Roland modules can do. There's better sound quality and realism in modules like the Pearl Mimic Pro, the ATV AD5, the 2-box Drummit range, and there's more scope for importing samples in the 2-box range and even the Alesis Strike. But if we assume that Roland are going to continue on the same kind of path that they already have been, and there's not really a great deal to suggest that they won't, where could they possibly go with their next flagship module? Well, this is my wish list for the next Roland flagship, and this isn't to say that there's one on the horizon. I don't believe that they're going to bring one out for another couple of years, and I don't have any information that you guys don't have. Some of these points are going to be pretty obvious, but some not so much. But I'll start with the most obvious one, a digital hi-hat. There's been a ton of rumour and speculation about a digital hi-hat ever since the TD50 was unveiled. With 2 digital pads and a 3rd USB port unused, surely they had something else in mind. And what could benefit from the digital technology more than a new hi-hat pad and controller? The hi-hats are one of the most expressive parts of an acoustic drum kit, and a lot of people are dissatisfied with the way that electronic hi-hats currently play. They're serviceable, but they are pretty lacking in many respects, so I want to see what they can do with a digital hi-hat. The features that I'd like to see the most are 3 zones that blend the same way that the digital ride does. One sec. Ta-da! So I want to be able to go from the edge all the way across the bow to the bell and have it gradually change in tone and texture as you do so. We've not really had a bell zone on hi-hats yet, and I think that this would be a massive step up in terms of articulation and playability. It would get us much closer to real if that's what you want. I also want a very fluid open and close with better transmuting and fewer misfires. I feel like they've done a decent job of this so far, and I haven't really had much chance to fully road test a VH13, so there might be slight gaps in my experience for accuracy there. But something that I've experienced, and I've heard a lot of other people talk about it too, with controllers like the FD8 or the VH11, is that sometimes a closed sample will still trigger as you're lifting your foot. Like if your foot lifts ever so slightly too early or too late, you can get misinputs. And I know that sounds like a you problem, you should fix your technique, but acoustic hi-hats are a little bit more forgiving here. They keep vibrating after the initial hit, and when you lift your foot they still react to this. And Roland modules can do this. Transmuting does seem to be a feature on the TD50, but it isn't always perfect. So I'm hoping for the closest accuracy possible. And this includes going down to the extra tight level as well. We need a good range of transitions so that it doesn't just jump from closed to extra closed, with little variation in between. Which leads me nicely into better overall articulation quality. The TD50's hi-hats are really lacking in terms of sample variation, and in fact even more so than previous modules, which is a bit of a kick in the teeth. It feels like there's only about 2 sample variations on both the edge and the bow when closed, and the extra tight articulation just doesn't sound very nice at all. Now there is an individual sample set for when you hold the edge of the hi-hat with your hand. There's an open and closed choke sound articulation, which I don't think a lot of people know about. And I think that's great, and that's the kind of thing that we should be looking for, but there's not enough sample variation in those articulations either. So simply improving those alongside with the other points, and ideally having more hi-hat sounds available rather than just 2 Roland, would make the hi-hat engine pretty awesome overall, and that would be a perfect match for a set of digital hi-hats. The next obvious point that would go hand in hand with an improved hi-hat is something that people have been wanting from Roland for a long time: VST sounds. But, personally, I don't expect Roland to do this. I don't think that they're going to change their modelling approach. Their core ideology when it comes to sounds pretty much rests on that ability to tweak every single little aspect of the sound character. So I would like to go with a less obvious approach. Of course, I want more variations between the samples, between the layers, between all of the velocities and the positioning, but I also want a better integration of imported samples. And I'm not talking about the ability to import full VSTs along with all of the multi-layers and round robins, because Roland, I don't expect them to allow this. I'm thinking something that would fit a bit more in line with Roland's philosophies. So what I'd like to see is the ability to add at least 3 layers on top of an existing base layer. Alongside this, I want to see full velocity fading control, so you could have, say, a soft, medium and hard hit layered on top of a Roland internal sound, and then I want the ability to do this not only on every zone, but also across various positionings. For the sake of simplicity, maybe call it 3 position zones: center, mid and edge. And then you could set the level of blending between those positions. I feel like this is a more realistic expectation than hoping for them to slap Superior Drummer 3 inside the next module. But it would also vastly improve what's already available with their one-shot imports. One thing that I've noticed when I've been creating my elements pack is that I've been having to pick between the overtone samples taken from the center of the drum or the edge of the drum, and I've been having to decide exactly which velocity I feel is the nicest sound. Being able to blend between those instead of choosing between them would add more to the realism. But not only that, you could also create some really crazy custom instruments if you decided not to stick only with acoustic samples. You could create some really warped, sonically interesting, semi-acoustic, semi-electronic sounds that morphs and changes as you play by blending between different samples. It would allow for a similar effect to Sunhouse's sensory percussion, albeit more basic, but it would fit very nicely into Roland's established ecosystem. And Roland could include more of their own elements or even some simple variations of their electronic sounds to really show off how interesting and unique it could be. Now, I can imagine this idea not being super popular because it introduces even more tweaking and doesn't really get you any closer to that VST level of sound that a lot of people like. So let me know what you think about this idea down in the comments and offer any improvements or suggestions yourself. The main problem with this potential complexity is that it highlights yet another issue. Stupid, tiny screens. Roland, please give us a bigger, better screen. Please? I wouldn't want to have to edit that amount of information on a tiny 80s LCD screen. I can't really imagine Roland going the full touchscreen route of the Mimic, and although I think it works completely fine, I feel like Roland's old school principle sort of rules out the idea of getting rid of buttons and faders entirely. And I've never had a problem with buttons and faders myself. They are pretty much exactly what's needed in a lot of situations. You should never underestimate the usefulness of tactile feedback in a high intensity, low light setting. In a perfect world, I think an interface somewhere between the Roland TD50 and the Gaver G9 is entirely possible and would be really good. A nice, large, colour touchscreen, but with the controls and faders that are important remaining intact. You get the best of both worlds there because you can easily touch on a parameter that you want to edit, but fine-tune and dial them in properly with buttons or scrollers or faders. Or if you have little faith in Roland ever implementing a touchscreen, and I'm kind of in that camp to be honest, at least give us a decent-sized colour screen like on the Alesis Strike, but also include the simplicity and the effectiveness of some of the buttons and dials that are on the TD27. Quick edit functions for things like pitch or tuning, muffling, pad volume, instrument type. There's little reason to be hiding all of these things in a wall of menus, and the TD27 proves that. So give us more information available on screen at any one time in a nice presentable way, quick access to the most useful functions on the fly, and fewer overall menus and pages to sift through. I've been using the TD50 for 3 years and I still forget where some of the functions are on a regular basis. This doesn't need to happen. Or, you know, if they're feeling really stubborn, a good app or software editor would probably suffice. Think somewhere along the lines of eDrum Lib and the Alesis Strike editor, or even the third-party SPDSX editor. There's no real reason why they couldn't implement something like this very easily, other than the fact that we'll probably just lump it and buy it anyway. Yeah, I really compromised on all of those points then. Does it show that I don't have a lot of confidence in that one? And the final one is really simple, and it should be a given on all Roland modules, but for some reason it just isn't. Higher quality presets out of the box to show you how capable the module really is. It's unthinkably maddening that they can't get this right. And I can already hear the cries of,
"Ah yes, but these machines are like a box of paint, a brush and a canvas. You create and you express your own identity. You aren't meant to play the presets, you're meant to follow your dreams."
And I'm like, yeah, I'm all for it, but come on. I am firmly in the make my own sounds camp. I literally made a store because of it. I don't really want to play the stock kits myself, I like pushing the module to see what it can do. But do you know what really helps you get excited about the possibilities of a module? Actually hearing some of those possibilities in a way that sounds good. It's really difficult to muster up any enthusiasm in your own creations when there's nothing to prove to you how powerful those tools are. Uninspired, dull, and often nasty sounding kits out of the box do nothing but disappoint you and make you feel like maybe you've wasted your money. Now, to give them some credit, a lot of the presets out of the box do try to showcase off a particular concept or effect. And I think that's a good thing to do. If you booted up your module and you were faced with 50 almost acoustic but not quite there sounding kits, you might prefer that to Roland's usual offerings, but that wouldn't really tell you what the other features of the modules do. But more often than not, you find that these concepts are displayed on kits that aren't very exciting either. And part of this is always going to come down to the quality of those bass samples included in your module. I've had to put in some serious time, effort and workarounds to get a lot of the sounds that I've made, and that's fine, it's kind of the point of it, but it would have been easier to achieve many of these sounds if the sample quality was better to begin with, and arguably they'd end up sounding even better once I'd gone through all of those processes with less harsh sounding samples. But ultimately, even if the samples started off sounding great, the presets should still be there demonstrating to you how far you could push those samples in different directions. The presets should effectively be an advert for what your own creative indulgences could achieve. It might lead to some players not bothering creating their own sounds and just playing the stock kits, which would annoy some people for some reason. But, I mean, we've paid enough for the privilege, right? It shouldn't be that difficult to enjoy something that you've spent that much money on. I would rather people bought the modules and played the stock kits and were happy with them than have them buy the module, be disappointed, and also not have any inspiration or direction for how to go about fixing the issue. So give us some better out-of-the-box sounds, Roland. I genuinely believe that would be to the benefit of us and them. What would make it onto your wishlist for the next Roland flagship module? Do you agree with what I've outlined here? Have I missed anything glaringly obvious? Or do you just think this list is a bit rubbish and what's in your head is way better? Let me know down in the comments. And hey, if you have a TD50 and you aren't chuffed with the sounds, I've got some big, powerful kits on my store. That's at eDrumworkshop.com. Go check them out. I personally think they're much more fun than the stock kits. And I can assure you that I'm going to be updating the store regularly with new kits as and when I make them. So please pop a like on this video if you enjoyed it. Hit subscribe and the bell to be notified of my next video. There's some other Roland videos that I've done up on the screen for you to check out. And do you want to hear a wish list for any other brands? Let me know. Whatever you think, let's have a chat about it and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers!